So there we go. Our first guest this afternoon. Thought some interesting comments there about the because we actually talked about it earlier, James, about the supply chain and the oil with Russia and all of that. We talked about that earlier, so it was interesting to get a different perspective and find out some of the things they're actually thinking about.
Somebody who actually knows what they're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, not just us. And you said it perfectly. We are on the outside looking in.
Yes.
So we're only guessing at what might be happening over there. So it was good to hear someone who's actually experiencing it and going through some of that right now.
Alex, we've reached my favorite part of the conference, lunchtime. So just like in Louisville, we looked out at everyone eating. Smells pretty good. Food looks very good. If you've ever been to a conference, you know sometimes conference food can be a little dicey. I got to say, food looks pretty good here. Very impressed. People seem happy. I don't see any angry eaters.
No food fights.
Not yet.
Not yet.
No
yeah.
food fights yet.
Unfortunately, we'll be missing it. So, but that's okay.
Full disclosure, I share everything with you guys. Over by the mystery truck, there's been muffins. I grabbed two. I ate one. One's in my bag because as a BC guy, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So I never know. But we were talking about Europe. So Alex, you and I were actually in London.
Yes.
2 weeks ago. You gave a keynote speech.
Yeah, with Margaret Millet
in London, Mr. Fancy. Tell me about the speech. What was the topic that you two spoke about?
We talked about raising the bar, raising the bar for executives, giving them a greater understanding of resilience. And I really enjoyed the talk because Margaret and I came at it from different directions. Margaret, being head of resilience at Uber Technologies, had a great insight from an executive viewpoint, some of the tools that they like to see and the tools that can be used and how to present that, which was great insight for me because I learned from her talking about that. And I came at it from the direction of looking within yourself too. We can have all the tools we want, but if we don't have the desire to use them or that je ne sais quoi, the thing inside of us that wants to learn, and do better. If we don't have that, then the tools won't matter. So I came from that perspective that executives, they need to change their mindset. They need to change some of their thinking and look at things and, take a step back sometimes to let others step forward to create resilience. And we talked that it's something that's over time. Sometimes I think that gets forgotten about when you hear people talk, you can be resilient. And then you have consultants like us who turn around, who'll turn around and say whatever we say, but sometimes we don't stress the point that this is going to take time to do. A change in processes, a change in the way we develop our processes, a change in thinking, the way we respond to things, and having open door policies and what that really means. And all of that comes into play. And so that was the direction I came in from. And from the feedback we got, it went over really well. Got a lot of good feedback. There were a bunch of questions for us, and I did receive them from Sergio, the coordinator. And I think Margaret and I are going to record something and answer some of the questions that we didn't get a chance to. But it was a great experience. You were there. You had lots to do as well.
I was there. Sorry, somebody just dropped something right in front of me and it startled me. But I want to go back to first something you said about management owning and management. You said management take responsibility for resilience. I think that's so important because I think a lot of our colleagues think that I'm the resilience manager or I'm the business continuity manager and I'm responsible for this. But the problem I see with that is you don't get that cultural adaptation.
Yeah.
I had a client once who was like, we want you to come do this project and we'll throw a ton of money at you because we want to create a culture of resilience. And I said, no, because I don't see how a consultant comes in and creates a culture of anything. For me, organizational cultures start and stop with management. Whatever's
Agreed.
important to management is important to the organization. Years ago, I worked at a company, and my first Friday there, I was told Fridays are casual Fridays. You could wear jeans. And I wanted to see, my first Friday, I didn't wear jeans. What does that mean? I saw the managing director walking around wearing jeans. So I wore jeans. And I think it's the same thing when we said we want to build a culture of resilience. So I'm going to create a document for that, or the business continuity manager's going to own that. No, management has to take responsibility. And then I love what you said about things that these things take time. And that can be frustrating when we're trying to hit 30-day goals or 90-day goals, or people want results right now, fast food society.
Yeah.
Creating a culture of resilience, or creating that forward thinking culture of risk. It's not just like, oh, we have a document now. We have a culture of resilience. That's not how it works. It takes a lot of time. And I see a lot of organizations don't have the patience anymore for really anything, but
Yeah.
especially something that's a little more esoteric. I had a very long conversation with a friend of mine last night, which we can get into later. He's like, well, what's the difference between BCM and resilience really? And part of it for me was a resilient family, a resilient community, a resilient organization. Part of it is you just know it when you see it. There's not a checklist. Certain things are common,
Yeah.
but there's certain things. There's not like, if I follow these Alex's 48 steps, I'm now resilient. There's some things that are a little, I don't know, pick a word, esoteric, nebulous, fuzzy.
Well, you also
but
have
they're
to go
important.
through. You also have to go through bad situations to learn from them.
Correct.
And if you're not learning from them, a culture where you have, Kevin mentioned it at the start, after action reports or
Yes.
lessons learned. If you're not going through that and actively following up on some of those things that you've learned, well, then you're not creating that culture of resilience where people can learn and respond and grow. You can't have resilience without some sort of a catastrophe.
Yeah, so that would be interesting. I'd like to see someone try and figure out, is there a way that we could teach fundamental, really, resilience without that catastrophe?
Yeah, I know one of the books that I talked to you about, when we do This Week in Business Continuity, at the end, we always talk about what books we're reading. And one of them talks about awareness. And it says in there, resilience is awareness. And you have to be aware of where you are, what you're doing, what you've gone through, how you're responding, and then, which is what I meant about leadership and mindset, how they respond to negative feedback. You made a decision about a project or a program that isn't going well. But don't point the finger at the project manager or the program or the analyst or all of that. Look at yourself. Take a hard look at yourself. I made that decision. I have to take responsibility for that. That's awareness. Learn from that, then move forward. And that's where resilience comes from. It's that self-awareness. To me, that's where resilience actually starts. And then from there, you can create, as you said, the culture, and the director or I think you said the director wearing the jeans, that person's showing the culture. Not just, you can wear jeans, but they're in a suit,
Exactly.
or a dress or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think that I like how you mentioned that awareness. I think that's really important. Rena Singh and I did a video series a couple of weeks ago talking about personal resilience. And one of the things we suggested was, after incidents, not just organizationally, but do you do an after action review, not for the company, not for your business unit, but do you do one for yourself? Or if something happens to your family, do you do an after action review as an individual? And we got a lot of comments and questions about, we had never thought of something like that before. Let's do an after action review, inward focused. personally. And that's where I like how you said that awareness. I think that's where you can build. That's a skill you can build. How do I build awareness in myself? Do a review of yourself in a time period. This thing happened. There was a storm. You're on microphone 4, whatever it is. Can you assess how did I handle? We had a situation in my family last week, something minor, but no big deal. But I was reflecting on my handling, my response was maybe a little more emotionally charged than it should have been, given what happened, and that kind of confused some of the things that the family did. And I think it's important to have those reflections, and it's important to share and admit those kind of things, because that is how we become stronger, and I think that is how we become more resilient.
And it's not easy.
No.
Because sometimes what self-reflection, sometimes you have to admit things where you did make a mistake.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and especially when we talk about leadership and resilience, don't want to admit that. They'd rather, it's easier to find blame than it is to accept responsibility. And that happens a lot. We see that all the time. Well, it's so-and-so's fault.
Yeah.
How can it be so-and-so's fault when they followed the direction that was given to them?
Absolutely.
Or they did what was expected of them. You had an expectation that wasn't communicated, or as we said earlier today, had an assumption that wasn't created.
Exactly.
And communicated. So how did that person do something wrong? And it's difficult to do that self-reflection, that self after action report, and say, how did I respond? Was I the best person I could be?
Yeah. And I think it's hard to admit that. And organizationally, you need to be in an environment, and there's been tons of studies about, are people allowed to admit mistakes? Because if they're not, they will hide them at all costs. It reminds me of some of the documentaries around Boeing and the 737 Max. There were people along the way who wanted to say, hey, I think there's something wrong here, or I think we made a bad assumption with this design. But the culture had gone from one of collaboration, where the goal was, we will make the best airplanes in the world, to a culture of, we will be the most profitable manufacturer in the world.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting very quiet right now.
We have to get quiet
Now we have to get quiet.
Dan has an announcement.
Dan Joyce.
Lunch is extended by 15 minutes, it seems. Well,
so I have an extra 15 minutes for muffins, which I'm excited about.
It seems that there's, I guess, a victim of success.
Yes.
Lots of people not getting through the lunch lineup fast enough.
So yeah, for those of you who couldn't hear, Dan Joyce, the conference director, was saying that there were so many people following up with questions of the speakers, and so many people networking, that then trying to get to lunch, we're a little short on time. Since this isn't the United States, if we were in the US, they would say, suck it up, you have 13 seconds to eat, shove it in your face. We are in a more civilized country, so we're going to extend lunch a few minutes, which I'm excited about. So going back to Boeing, you had this culture shift of, we are going to build the best airplanes in the world, to, we are going to be the most profitable airplane manufacturing company in the world. So it shifted from, at any point, anyone on the line or any engineer could stop the design or build process. And they had that authority and that autonomy to push that button and say, hey, this isn't right. And then when that culture changed, you were not only not allowed to do that, people were pushed out or terminated for saying that. So to me, the first step of admitting, being able to admit mistakes that Alex mentioned, are you in an environment that you can admit mistakes. Like
Mhm.
I make a lot of mistakes. Anybody who knows me, I'm a walking mistake. Um, when I make a mistake and I share that with my family, with my wife, and say, hey, here's how, upon reflection, I should have done this, that, or the other better. They don't bring that up 10 years later. Like, oh, I remember that time. That kind of shuts people down. And I use that as an extreme example, but I think we see that in the business world too. Alex makes a mistake at work. That's not a big deal, but people keep bringing it up or teasing him about it, or it's in his performance review. What's going to happen the next time he makes a mistake? He's going to do everything he can to hide it. And
To
that
hide
kind
it
of, yeah. And
or blame.
that shrinks. I think out of self-defense, you stop being aware. And as you mentioned, that's one of the key components of being resilient.
And that's part of the culture that organizations create and leadership is, will they accept, do they have mechanisms to where you can communicate things that are wrong, things that you see are not working. I know one vice president I was working with, she told me about a company she was with where they had a electronic suggestion box, not an actual box, but you could, an email address, you could send things in with ideas and how to make things better or address concerns. And it turns out that who it was going to was making all the decisions. Like, nah, I don't think that's important. And then hitting delete and just passing on the things they thought was important on to everybody. So that electronic suggestion box didn't last very long, and yet it was all promoted as part of a feedback in the culture, and it didn't work because one person ended up making all the decisions, and the stuff that should have gone forward, that person didn't think was important. And I think a lot of leadership do that. They'll say it. I mentioned open door policy, and I know I've mentioned it with you a few times. I hate open door policies when people talk about it, because if say you're the vice president and I'm trying to meet with you and you say you have an open door policy, I have to go through your admin or a manager to get permission to
All the
talk to you.
gatekeepers.
I get it booked. If I get it booked, then it gets scheduled for another day and then moved again and again and again and again. All the while, James is saying he has an open door policy, but it's actually in the hope that I just go away and forget about it. So it really bugs me. And I think if someone says they have an open door policy, schedule a time during the week, let's say a Wednesday at 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 or whatever day, whatever time, have that where you really do have an open door policy. Someone like me can stop by and say, James, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And that's it. And when we talk, there's no repercussions against me for bringing something up. It's a free discussion, nothing personal. There is no personal. And I think that's another piece that people take too. They take things personally. A process doesn't work, not the person, the process. So that's my open door policy rant.
I love that idea. I think companies should implement that. It reminds me, Alex, of colleges and universities. Professors at a lot of colleges and universities have required office hours, right? So every Tuesday and Thursday, they're in their office from 9 to 11. They have no appointments, they have no meetings. That is truly open door. Anyone who's a student can go and speak to that professor about anything. I would love to see an organization implement that. That's a consulting idea from us to you for free. We won't even charge you for that.
Yet.
Maybe tomorrow we will, but today it's free.
And the one thing, I know we started this whole talk with a resilience talk in BCI. What I found interesting too is all the talk about resilience is there still is no one definition. I don't know if you realize that, but every person I talked to had a different perception of what, or definition, I should say, of what resilience was, either as a person in their community or their organization. And I think a lot of people are still trying to find, what does resilience mean? what to have something they can pin on the wall that everyone can go to and say this is what resilience is. And I found that interesting at BCI when different speakers were having a different viewpoint on what resilience was. And I think at the end of the day, resilience has to be what it means to you as a person. If it's your organization, what does resilience mean in your organization, and adopt that. Not what it means at James Inc., James Green Inc., because you're going to have one viewpoint. This is what it means to James Green. I'm going to have my own. This is what it means to Alex Fullick. And neither are wrong because we're both moving forward. We're both, progressing. We're both growing. And I think that gets forgotten. Adopt the definition that works best for you and your organization rather than trying to get someone else to tell you what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at my phone and I've got up, Alex can see it, because I actually had a text conversation. This isn't a plant, and this is what I do with my life, I guess, for better or for worse. Somebody asked what I thought the difference between, resilience and business continuity management is. And the last part of the sentence is, I wrote, while there are some commonalities between resilient groups, part of it to me is you know it when you see it. That's why many of these resilience frameworks and standards are ridiculous to me.
I'll second that.
To Alex's point, what's resilient for Stone Road may not be what Illuminate Advisory needs for resilience. So working off the same exact framework, they're two different businesses with two different plans and purposes. So there's some commonality there, certainly. But I get worried in our industry when the last conference that you and I attended, there was a lot of conversation immediately around, well, what's this definition? What's this framework? I think it kind of loses the spirit of what resilience is. Like for me, resilient is you not only survived anything and everything, you thrived, you grew. Your family, your community, your business, your organization is better off. How do we like to put everything in a box in our profession? How do you take that spirit, that essence, and put it into a framework? I think we spend too much time on that focus.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what I was thinking as well. I was having too many people trying to figure out what is resilience. What does resilience? What should resilience mean to me? Well, what does it mean to you now? That's the main thing. We're sitting here, but doesn't mean we enjoy the same colors or the same music or anything. But we're doing the same thing here. We don't have to be the same when it comes to resilience either. I said my definition is self-awareness, and then growing from there. Well, self-awareness, take that from to an organizational platform. That's the culture. Taking a look at what are we doing internally that's helping promote everybody, not just an us and them, leadership and employees. And I think we're looking too much for the answers with regards to resilience outside rather than trying to find the answer inside. And which was one of the key, to circle right back to the very beginning of our talk, was the direction that I came in for the speak at BCI. Was the keynote was that was the direction I was coming from. You can have all these tools, but you got to look inside for some of these answers. I can't tell you, how to be resilient or what you need to do if you don't have it inside you to do it.
But Alex, I need a checklist. I need a checklist for everything in my life, Alex.
Well, and that just promotes that tick box mentality, audit mentality. And then you're never going to get buy-in. You won't get resilience. And what you think is resilience is just, I have a document. Oh, so we're resilient. No, not even close. It just means you know how to create a document. That's all it means. And I think that sometimes we blur that line and think that, because we have a plan or, we have this tick box then we are a certain way. And I don't think that's true.
I think the other thing for me too, resilience should be based on what's important to you. And like you said, what's important to you and I is different. What's important to our families is different. Our organizations is different. So that definition of resilient, when you're trying to force everyone across that commonality, when the fundamental driver is different, that's where you get disjointed. And I think that's where you see, to your point, people pass an audit. How many organizations were compliant with every standard in the world March 1 of 2020, right? Or how many companies were in compliance with Sarbanes-Oxley in the United States, and then 2008 came along and all these financial institutions collapsed. But they met every standard, every law, every rule. They passed every audit.
Yeah.
Maybe your BC program was audited and you're like, you guys are bulletproof. And then you had ransomware and COVID and a wildfire, and now you're out of business. So I really struggle with, frameworks, and I appreciate and understand people want to look at, why is this athlete successful, or why is this person successful, or why does this organization thrive, and look for those commonalities. But for me, those should be a starting point.
Yes.
Not the end point. Like, these best practices and guidelines are meant to be guidelines. They're not fiats, right? Like, here's some ideas you should consider. When I coach and mentor people, I say, here's some things you should look at. But I don't say, here's what you have to do. Here's the only thing you can ever think about. This is based on my experience. Here's 3 things you might want to consider.
What worked well and what
Yeah.
didn't. Yeah.
And we do that, with this is now our second live broadcast, right? And last time we said, we need some tea, we need some mints, we need some cough drops. So now we have those. But other people may be like, well, why do you have those? Those are ridiculous. But if you put that in a framework and a checkbox, now someone's going to say, in order to do a podcast, I need 5 tea bags. No, you don't. It's it's what works for us at this point. And I use that as an absurd example because I think that's what happens with our colleagues. They say, well, Stone Road said I need this, that, and the other, so that's what I need. No, that's what Stone Road needs for their business. That's what Illuminate needs. That's what my family needs. My wife's definition. Now we're in hour 3, so we're just letting it all hang out. My wife and I have very different definitions of when we're running low on something in our pantry. So, for example, I think we're running low on ketchup when the ketchup bottle is completely empty and there's no more ketchup. My wife thinks we're running low when there's only 2 bottles of ketchup in the pantry. So very different. So why would you take my standard of running low, which is, probably wrong in this direction, and her standard of running low, which is the extreme in the other direction? And now what if that became the law that every family on our street had to do the same? You would say that's ridiculous, but we do that in our profession.
We do. Look at all the fuss that comes out about BIAs and how to get the information that comes out of BIAs.
How to do them.
Oh,
how
my
many
goodness.
to do them. How often to do them.
I sometimes I feel for David Lindstedt and Mark Armour. They must be made of Teflon because they have bombs lobbed at them big time when they first came out with the adaptive business continuity stuff, where they said, you don't need a BIA, you can do it different ways and things like that. Yeah, and I don't think we can say on one side, you want to develop something fit for purpose that suits your organization, but then you have to follow this checklist, this framework, and do it this way. Well, then it's not fit for purpose. You're taking my organization and trying to put me into this framework rather than taking the framework and adopt it to my organization. And I think that's what happens a lot.
Maybe that could be our next book. Business continuity is not ketchup bottles.
Yeah, you're in trouble when you get home, eh? If she hears this.
If you're hey, if that's the worst thing I say today, that my wife prefers us to have 2 bottles of ketchup in the pantry over a 5-hour broadcast, I will take that gladly as a win. So,
Well, we've come to break time again. We'll take another 10, 15-minute break.
absolutely, we want to thank this hour's sponsor, Illuminate Advisory, the risk advisory firm, inspiring organizations to harness the power of risk. Thank you for sponsoring this segment. We will see everyone back at the top of the hour.
If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.